Dustin Poirier, can he get a title shot with Islam? More of what I'm asking you, do you predict that Dustin Poirier will be next? And I'd be very light on the idea you have a 35-year-old. You'd be talking about bringing in a 35-year-old for a title shot who in his previous fight just had a title shot. Right? I mean, it's not as though like Dustin's pursuing this like Belal Muhammad. He just can't break through. He can't get his opportunity. It's like, no, one fight ago he had a title shot. So I only suggest that for you. How's Dustin going to get the title shot? If he's going to fight Islam, how does he get there? And, okay, great. Who deserves it? Let's look at the rankings. Well, no, let me stop you right there. You don't need to. He's ranked high enough. He's number 3. Anyone in the top 5 on any given day gets title shots, so we're good there. Star power, no problem. Meaningful win. In his last fight, meaningful opponents. Like, we're just checking these boxes off, right? But how many 35-year-olds are getting title shots? And again, it's a little different if you go on a streak of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you start to throw the guy's age out. That's irrelevant. He's done enough work. I'm just sharing for you, right? Like Dustin, as big of a supporter as I am, if we're being fair, he's 1-1 in his last 2. Oh, by the way, one of those was for a title. Oh, by the way, the guy that beat him that currently has that title can't get the shot with Islam. So if that guy can't get the shot, like how are we going to do this? And before you think I'm being the skunk at the garden party, I'm all for getting him to fight. So let's be real literal and try to break down how are we going to do that. Now, to the best of our knowledge, Oliveira and his opponent is the number 1 contenders match. Like that has been stated. And we need to be real careful with that. I mean, you're going to have a hard time getting Oliveira to the ring. You're not going to get Oliveira to the ring against Islam, which I have told you repeatedly. You didn't listen to me. You went and signed it, and then you didn't get him there, and you should have listened to me. Now, can we back him up one? Can we get him to the ring for a number 1 contenders match that would then feed him to Islam if he truly believed it was going to get him there? Because, right, it's one of those spots. If the person doesn't want the incentive, they're not going to want to do the job. And I'm only suggesting that for you. Like, I don't know that I fully believe that's the number 1 contenders match. However, if we are looking for some new blood and the opponent has a great performance against Charles, he might just make himself the number 1 contender. Well, okay, that's not the same thing, but it's still helpful. Right? And that's what we see more times than not. Very rarely do we see a number 1 contenders match. I know it gets stated, but where we actually follow through with it, I mean, it's very, very rare. It's rare that it gets stated, but it is well less than 10% of the time that it gets stated that it actually happens. And the reason for that is just, when we said it, we meant it for one guy. So I could see a scenario where if Charles gets beat, that gentleman does go on to fight for the title. If Charles wins, we still need a number 1 contender because he's not going to do it. All right, no problem. No problem. Just stick around. Stick around for 2 more walkout songs, and you're going to have Max and Justin. And Justin Gaethje was in a bit of a battle for number 1 contender, and he ended it all with one statement. He said, "You do not finish Dustin Poirier and not get a title shot." And everybody went quiet. Like, yep, he's got us. So if he was to beat Max Holloway, he's now beaten Dustin Poirier and Max Holloway. It's a very strong argument to fight for a title. But there's very few things that trump new blood. Like when the matchmakers have a bit of a deadlock and they got to tip the scale one way or the other, if one guy has had a shot and is a veteran and the other guy has not, and he's young and appears to have more shelf life, he will get that nod every time. All right. So again, that's not what we're trying to figure out. What we're trying to figure out is how do we get Dustin into that position? All right, 1, Max has to lose. Max then has to make it very clear that he wants to take that BMF and that big victory and use it for a title shot at 145 pounds, which according to Max himself is exactly what he's going to do. Great. we would need Oliveira to win. We would need Oliveira to win, of which everybody goes, okay, great, it's you and Islam, we're doing this rematch, and then Chael's going to beg you and tell you, don't waste your time, and then sooner or later, he will not do that fight. And then is when you could turn to Dustin Poirier. And there's not really another scenario where that's going to get over. Even as helpful as Islam himself is being, and as helpful as Islam's manager Ali is being, they are going to quit being helpful as soon as Justin Gaethje becomes available. He's not available right now. He's got a match coming up in 4 and 5 weeks, which is why there is an opportunity, and everybody's doing their best to get the most notoriety and the most attention, the biggest paycheck. I'm just sharing, if those two go head to head, the statement that Justin made, which is you can't stop Dustin and not get a title shot, that's going to hold up. That's going to win the day. That's a hard fight, though. You know, a lot of people think Max is going to win. So every now and then in the sport, and it's not often, the best thing to do is to do nothing. Every now and then, you take your oars out of the water and you wait. I believe we're seeing a waiting game, just to further my point, right now at 145 pounds. I think instead of making a match, let's wait. Because if Aljo slides up to featherweight and gets a win over Kattar, just by example, that is a, wow, the parity there changes that whole landscape. Meanwhile, 2 hours later on that same evening, if Max Holloway does in fact become the BMF and says, I want to use this golden ticket at 145, the landscape has changed. And one thing about Ilia Topuria is he came into a number one contendership against Volk in a way that nobody else had, which is his path avoided Max Holloway. Now, many believe, myself included, it avoided Max because Max had eliminated one after the next, just keep him away. But whether that's the reality or that was a coincidence, perception and reality are the same thing within this sport, which is a very strong argument for why Max and Topuria need to fight. That's tomorrow's problem. Today is simply a question of would you support the concept with no fights in between. Right now, the work that's done, 1-1 in his last 2, however you want to look at it. Dustin Poirier against Islam for the belt.